So awesome. Well, guys, what's up, y'all? This is Joey on The Chosen Show. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode number 17. Man, we're just continuing to roll these out. Again, our dream, our passion, our heart is to ignite you to your God-given purpose, calling. I don't care if you're a nonprofit leader, a business leader, a church leader. God has a calling in your life, a purpose for your life, and we just want to take that to the next level. And so we bring in people who are called by God, who have done incredible things for the kingdom, and just really pick their brain, pick their heart. And so excited about this. Again, we keep our episodes pretty short. We keep them, 30, 40 minutes. We're not here all day, but we pray that this content changes your life and takes you to the next level God has for you. So I'm here with my man, Steve Carter. Steve, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks for having me on. I've been looking forward to this.
Absolutely, man. Steve is an incredible leader. If you don't know anything about Steve, he has been in church ministry for a while. He has a book called The Invitational Life. He's an author. You also are on the podcast. What's the name of the podcast again?
The podcast is Home Team Podcast.
Yes, Home Team. But you also just had a new release of a ministry called Craft and Character. That's super powerful. We'll get into that a little bit here in a second. But Steve's heart is, I believe, communication. He's an incredible communicator. And also on his Instagram, make sure you follow him with the daily Psalms. Are you still going on that?
We are, man. We got 100 more to go. We're at Psalm 50. I chose the largest book ever, and I'm not regretting it, but I probably did have the foresight to think one psalm a day.
Half a year just going through it. I love it.
Yeah.
And so inspired, so many people on that. Love that. But man, would just love to get to know you, the audience. Again, I know you've been connected with Willow Creek and different incredible ministries. Would love to get to know your story though, just for our audience, just to hear maybe a quick 3 or 4 minute testimony. Love to hear, man.
Yeah, I grew up in Southern California. My parents weren't believers, and my mom put me into a parochial school. So it's one of those schools that's like preschool through community college with the church connected to it. And I'm in 7th grade and not going to church. I love sports. And there were 2 juniors in high school. Their names were Dominic and Nathan. They were the first, I didn't even have a word for it, but they were the first people I wanted to be like in actual life. They were funny. They were leaders. They loved sports. And I didn't have words for this, but now I know they were Christ followers. But Dominic and Nathan, they went by the name Dominate, which is just so awesome. And I remember one day playing basketball, and Dominic came up to me and said, "Hey, Carter, do you want to learn how to dominate life?" And I didn't even think he knew who I was. So this junior in high school sees me and calls something out. And I say, yeah. And they start picking me up. They take me to In-N-Out, and if you've never been to In-N-Out Burger, it's where like the Shekinah glory of God descends in burgerly form. And they were asking me questions about like life and faith. And within 7 months, I got baptized. And I think my story has been, in one essence, paying it forward because someone called something out of me, and also feeling absolutely blessed to have women and men in my life see something in me that I, for so long, didn't even see in myself, and were relentless. Almost like Paul was to Timothy, in calling that out and making space for me to step up and try to teach and try to lead and fail and get back up and try to teach and try to lead and learn. And so that's been my story. I was a film major, but it just got to a point where I realized, man, I think I was created to tell stories, and God just worked in a pretty miraculous way. And I've just been on this journey for the last 20 years, trying to figure out what it means to communicate the scriptures in ways that are so accessible that can't be denied. They just it's like what will inspire people and compel people to love everyone always.
Wow. So good, man. And you've been connected to different ministries. You wrote a book. Tell me a little bit about your book. Like, why did you want to write it? What's it about? Yeah.
Yeah. So the book's called This Invitational Life and Risking Yourself to Align with God's Heartbeat for Humanity. And I think the more that I got connected to the scriptures, the more that I realized, man, it's so easy. The higher you get up in leadership, the more, whatever you want to call it, influence, or the more you have and acquire, the easier it is to disconnect yourself from people. And I know a lot of pastors, I know a lot of like sincere Christ followers, but if you ask them honestly, outside of a Sunday when they're teaching, who have you led to faith? Like who? It's they'll lead someone when they come to them, but who are they going after?
Wow.
And I just felt like I wanted to redeem the word evangelism. So I don't really use the word evangelism except for like the last part, but this is really just a book to go, hey, how do we take our story and make it wildly accessible? And how do we understand the heartbeat of God and give that away? And so that's the essence of the book. And I think it was me writing from a place of how I had missed it and how God had just wrecked me. And really the catalyst of it was my 10-year wedding anniversary. I'd saved up for a few years. I'd never been to Hawaii, but took my wife and our kids, and my in-laws ended up joining us as well. And we were staying on a cliff on Maui. And it took us, you had to go through like 3 condos to get to the water and go down this cliff. And every day there'd be high tide and low tide. And I loved like when the tides would change because the waves would come in, you could go surf. And, but I was grilling out one day and I heard this woman scream, help. And I looked out and I could see waves that were just massive. And I realized, oh, she can't swim. And she was thinking it was low tide and the tide's changing. So the sea level's rising. And I don't know what came over me. It's like spirit of David Hasselhoff. And I just took off running. And I'm running and I'm thinking about my friends who are lifeguards, like in Cali, going, not on my watch. I jump in the water. I swim to this woman. I get her on my back. I bring her in. She's not really breathing. Her kids come up. They're weeping. Literally, like, we bring this woman, like, she ends up starting to breathe. And I'm floored. I'm like literally like floored. Wow. Cortisol to the max. A dude with the corona is like, well done, man. And, and just like, but I look back up at the cliff where I had come from. And like, here's the water. Here's this cliff, 150, 200 feet up in the air. And there's about 40 or 50 people standing at the edge of the cliff watching. Wow. And I felt like the Spirit of God looked at me and said, Steve, how often in your life are you one of them? Because you have people in your life who are drowning in addiction, drowning in their finances, drowning in their marriage, drowning in their identity, drowning in their faith. And how often are you one of them? And yet you ran after some woman that you don't even know her name, but the people who you do know their name, your arms are folded up on the cliff. And bro, I kid you not, I wept. And I just started going through the Gospels and like spend like the majority of my time on my anniversary just reading and just going, what does it mean to risk ourselves? What does it mean to go after those who are hurting and suffering and need and invite them into a better life? And realizing you can really judge how invitational a person's life is by who shows up at their funeral. And I just realized, like, man, if I were to die right now, I think I'd have a lot of people who looked like me, who acted like me, dressed like me, probably voted like me, like my same teams. But I don't think I think God's heartbeat is for that group of people and so many more. And I just want to get connected to this so many more.
All right, we're done. We're done right there. That's so powerful, though. That's such a powerful image. And I want to go back to that here in a little bit, because one thing I love about your communication, I can tell that you have such a deep deep relationship with God. And you've been in church leadership for a while. And, I work with a lot of church leaders, and they're going right through the motions, and they're trying to find that, but you have such a sensitivity to God's voice and his words and his, and just so that. So I want to go back to that here in a little bit, but before we jump into even deeper conversation, I know you're a Last Dance fan. You were Michael Jordan. So I was looking at your Instagram, I was creeping a little bit, and I was like, man, this guy knows more about Michael Jordan than I think the documentary people do. I really think so. I was like, man, you knew everything. I just got to know, like, I love sports. I'm a competitive guy. I love it. I love The Last Dance, and that was a great documentary. But I just want to know, like, pick your brain a little bit. Where did that passion come from? Like, I know you play a little ball or something, but where'd that come from?
Yeah, I think sports was an avenue for connection with my adopted father. And so I think those were some of the sweetest moments when I could like sit up in his lap and watch a Michigan football game. And I think that there was just real tenderness in those moments in a house where there wasn't a lot of tenderness.
Wow.
So I think I got connected to my dad through sports, and I just connected to it. And it became this escape. And I have a pretty photographic memory. And so I just could remember stats as a kid. And this was the beginning of almost sports talk radio with like Jim Rome and Trash Talk, especially in Southern California, the Fab Five and this, just all of that. And I just soaked it up. I loved it all. And I just became an avid sports, fan. And honestly, like when I talk about the Home Team podcast, that is our podcast that's like dedicated to faith and sports and culture and family, and with ESPN's like Sam Ponder from NFL Countdown and Sam Acho who plays for the Buccaneers. But it's us just chopping it up. But that's where I need that creative outlet. It's good for me. It's a healthy escape for my life.
Good. Well, I'll just tell you something. I learned a lot from your Instagram stories. I was like, man, I was like writing down stuff because as I was watching, I was like, wow, I didn't know all this about Michael, and just so cool, man. And I think, I love that. I love competition also. I feel like I've learned probably more about life in sports than a lot of things. So, but man, I would love just to hear, like, obviously COVID-19, it's been crazy. I feel like I've learned a lot. God has taught me quite a bit in this time, just whether it's in leadership or my own self, it's revealed things. A lot going on. What has God been teaching you just in this coronavirus time? Maybe just personally, we could start there. Like, what has God been really pulling out of your heart?
Well, I think one of the biggest pieces is I'm living in Phoenix. I felt like we stepped out of a really, really difficult situation in Chicago. And I felt like God told me to go to the desert and wait for instructions. Wow. And I'm a competitor. I'm someone who's achievement driven. And I feel like I realized like I can't achieve my way out. I can only grieve my way through. And so the desert has been this place, it's like in between, this place that is profoundly uncertain. And I think what's curious is what the liminal causes humans to do. The liminal often will cause such like obsessive compulsive tendencies or prediction narratives or conspiracy theories or scapegoating. I think we all have all of this in us. But we have a whole bunch of distractions and Tim Keller language, counterfeit gods that don't have us have to deal with the illusion of not truly being in control. And so now we're all confronted with, I don't know. I don't know what tomorrow is. I don't know what it's going to look like. I don't know if we're in the midst of a recession. I don't know. And what do we do when we don't know? So that's been the stuff that's been profound to me, is the distractions have been stripped away, the selfish tendencies, because you're stuck at home, you know what I mean? Like all of this stuff, and going, wow, like I can't go to the gym. I can't do these things. So, and getting really in tune to listening to my body, because I think that's, it's one of the beautiful gifts that Jesus gave us, is that he was incarnated reality. And I just go, man, some of this stuff, I just, the stress or the anxiety or my tendencies to predict or scapegoat, rather than just sit in the tension of, Lord, I don't know, but I'm still going to trust. This is, it's just the formative stuff. So
really good. And I think I'm similar like you as an achiever. I'm a 3 on the Enneagram. I don't know what you're on the Enneagram.
Come on.
You're a 3?
I'm a 3. If I'm not winning, I'm sinning.
Hey, you know what's crazy is the last 3 people I've had on this show are all 3s. I'm like, man, we're just making a club. But I think for me, it's like, it's hard to know what we should control when this all goes away. I think I'm similar with you. It's like, man, obviously there's things we have to do, like controlling my routine and taking care of my body and keeping that stuff. But there are things it's almost like the control starts to grow outward when it's just normal life, because we're always just almost like want to control more. Here's my question. What maybe should we control, and what should we not try to control? Because I think as Americans, that gets pretty gray pretty quickly for us.
That's a great question. Well, I think the only thing that we control, honestly, is the present moment. So for me, I just try to be in control of right here and now. And so I think my tendency is to try and control tomorrow. I can't. My tendency is to try and control my reputation. I can't. My tendency is to try and control the past and how it's, messaged. I can't.
Right.
All I have profound levels of control is, am I showing up to this conversation with you? Am I present, or is my mind on another conversation? Is my heart in another place? And I think the more that we can be in tune, a lot of times in seminaries or preaching classes, people tell you, keep the main thing, and that was the message I heard in the 90s, which is, and I often would say, no, I think we're supposed to keep the main thing. I think we are supposed to remain in the vine. And the more that we remain, the more that we're actually going to bear the best kind of fruit. And that's going to come from us trusting the pruning, because we will be pruned, because suffering will happen, trusting the process and trusting his promise. And I think for me, it's like, I just am trying to remain. I'm just trying to abide. I'm trying to make my home and allow Christ to take up as much residency as possible, so that I can be present to you. So I can be present to what I'm feeling, to be present to the ache and the sadness of what's going on in our world, even right now. And often I have so many counterfeits to try and distract me from what I can't control. So that's for me. And yeah, I agree with you. Routines are good, but for me, it's I am trying to eliminate anything that's not going to allow me to stay focused and truly present in the present, and truly present to his presence.
So good. That's a Last Dance thing too. Did you hear that they talked about Michael Jordan? They said that he stayed in the present.
Oh, yeah, dude.
Yeah. It's powerful.
So true. They called him a mystic, and it really is. And again, most of the people, whether artists, whether entertainers, whether pastors, whether business leaders, that's one of the things that they're able to do, is their emotional highs and lows. They are steady. They almost get more focused in the present and even intention, because they're like, oh, I see it. Whereas a lot of us, when we're bouncing like a ping pong ball to the future, which creates anxiety, or the past, which creates shame, and we're just like going back and forth, we often miss, like many rabbis believe that Moses did, the burning bush for so many years. You know, the rabbis midrash often talk about how, you know, that bush had been burning, his headspace and heart space just didn't see it. And so how often do we miss what God has put right before us because we're focused on yesterday or worrying about tomorrow?
So good. And you shared, I think that's a good place to transition, about what's been going on in our world. Obviously, George Floyd, Ahmaud. When you talk about control, it's a lot of feelings, right? And I know it's not a secret, we're both white, right? We only have so much perspective in this conversation. But our God is a God of justice. Our God is a God of truth, and he is a God of restoration. And so I would just love to hear what God he has been speaking so many things to my heart during this time. He's been even revealing things in my heart that I didn't even know was there. I would love to hear and I remember at the retreat we were at together, there was you shared that first night, something that was just on fire in your heart about the justice. I'd love to hear just what God has been teaching you in this time.
Yeah, so I'm obviously as a pastor and as a preacher, for better or for worse, you know, I tend to take my cues from this ancient book that, you know, people will wrestle whether it's been inspired, but what always moves me is that it continues to inspire. And I think when you look at what has happened, first and foremost, it's wrong, it's evil, it's sin, it's broken, it's tragic, and it's been going on for generations after generations after generations after generations. It's just it won't stop until people begin to say this can happen no more. But I think where it's got me is Acts 1:8. Jesus says, hey, the Spirit of the Lord has come upon you in power. You're going to be my witnesses in Jerusalem, which is the familiar, Judea, which is the people that we think are less than, Samaria, which is the people we can't stand, and the ends of the earth, the people that we have no desire to understand. So you fast forward one chapter, and it's Pentecost, so the Spirit of God's coming. And then you fast forward, you got this guy who is almost like trying to police the system and gives orders for Stephen to be killed. So Stephen dies. Then this guy's going 150 miles into modern day Syria to try and shut down a movement of God. Again, as like policing that this name of Jesus does not get out. He's going to imprison them. He's going to and has this encounter, goes blind. And then all of a sudden his eyes are awakened and he basically understands like, oh my goodness, this is for the Gentiles. Like I'm supposed to take this to the ends of the earth. And I'm going to suffer. Now, then you fast forward and you got another guy who is part of the original Peter, who has this unbelievable understanding of like profound transformation about like holiness, what is holy, what's unholy, and Gentiles were considered unholy. And he goes over to some guy's house who's a Gentile, and something happens. He recognizes the Spirit's already at work and he didn't bring it. It's already there. So now he has to go back and go, guys, I just saw something. What just happened? God is on the move. Like this whole thing is moving from Judea to Samaria to the ends of the earth. Like this is bigger than us. And the other disciples are like, what? No, that can't happen. They get into this whole argument. Then a couple chapters later, Acts 15 is the biggest theological decision where they're trying to merge these worlds together. Now, here's what I say is after this, some disciples and Paul take this message to the ends of the earth. A lot of the disciples end up going back to Jerusalem. And here's the crazy piece. They go back to what they can control. And when they go back to what they can control, I think they lose out on the Spirit's power. And they go back to what they can control. And I think this is the tension, that there is a profound difference between sympathy for what has happened and continues to happen than actually people rising up to make systemic change. And there is a lot of sympathy online. And again, I'm not here to judge anybody. But I think the question will be for the brothers and sisters who are in profound levels of leadership, are you going to go backwards to the way it was in which you can control with sympathy? Or are you going to go forward in the Spirit's power to actually make this where it is going, which is the New Jerusalem, where we're going to gather as like with tribes from every nation? And I think it forces us to ask questions about, well, who's making decisions for organizations? Do they all look like us? You know, on leadership teams, like you're sympathetic if it's all white. And you look at your 15-mile radius around your church and you have like a theology, a footprint, you're sympathetic, but you're not actually changing the system. Two different things. But until you get people who you're making space for and actually saying, hey, I need your voice. Like, if we're actually get to the ends of the earth, I need your voice. I need your wisdom. I need your leadership. And so honestly, for me this week has been a week of profound levels of repentance. Because I haven't done enough, man. I haven't done enough with the spaces that God has entrusted in me. I haven't done enough. And this isn't like white tears and white guilt. It's not that. For me, it is the conviction to say, I've never said this out loud. So this, and again, this is probably stupid for me to say, but I'll say this. I feel this, like, it's one thing if you put your knee on someone's neck, it says, I can't breathe. It's another thing when systems are putting their knees on people's necks and saying, you aren't empowered to be who you were created to be.
Wow.
And so in cultures that assimilate, and cultures that hold people down, and cultures that, and I think for us as the church, for us in businesses, for us as leaders, for us as majority culture, for us as white men, I think we have to step back and say, hey, where have I protected my paycheck, protected my position, protected myself, instead of created space for the system to actually change? And again, I'm not blaming anybody for being sympathetic. I'm just saying, I think there's a lot of friends who are really tired of the sympathy, and we'd love to see some people use their voices and platforms to say, we're going to make space. We're going to make space. And it's going to come at a sacrifice, for ups on the weekend for us. It's going to come at a sacrifice for decisions. It's going to come at a sacrifice for, it's going to look different. It's going to sacrifice because we won't be in control, but we will reach the ends of the earth, and it will prepare us, because this life is just practice for the next life, according to Modest Mouse, the band, but like, and I think in scripture as well, but like, it's preparing us for the New Jerusalem. And so if we can't do it here, like, heaven's not going to be probably what we want it to be.
Man, you get me fired up. Up.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So
you shared so much good. Like, that is so good, and this is going to help so many people. I have so many thoughts, so I'm trying to like filter them all and thinking of the next question, because I have so many thoughts. And I mean, so I don't know if you know this about me and my wife. We work for an inner city nonprofit. So I do work for a church too, help a church out and preach. But our main job is a nonprofit in the middle of the inner city. We moved in the middle of a predominantly Black neighborhood, have lived there for a while. And it wasn't until, there was always that, like, okay, there needs to be change or something. But it wasn't until that experience of uncomfortability, of losing control, that God started to wreck my heart. Like I had control over here and I knew about some things and, you know, and I read about some things, right? But it was when we gave up control that God was like, I realized, oh my gosh, there has to be something done. So here's my question: as two Caucasian males talking about races, which is, you know, I'm learning, right? I'm always humble. I bring humility into this. We don't know the solutions. Honestly, we don't know the answers, but we can learn and listen and have humility, empathy. Here's my question. And this is the big thing that I even shared something yesterday on Facebook. Definitely move some good conversation forward. There's a march in our city that me and my wife are actually a part of tonight. It's a peaceful march about whatever. Here's my question. The quietness, okay? It was actually kind of refreshing because I actually saw people speak up more on the white side than I've probably seen in a while, which I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's just the timing or the social media or everybody's at home, so they're seeing it. I don't know. But I think for me, why the passivity? Why is it passive? Is it the comfortability and it's controlled? Why in the maybe more white circles when we see, you know, sex trafficking, that's injustice, we're loud about that. Like, you know what I'm saying? I hear a lot of circles, sex trafficking, like loud. We put red lines on our hands. We put, you know, we pump our fists and run after that. But the moment that this happens, or some injustice that has to do with African American people, why, when this happens, why is it radio silence or just numbness within the white maybe circles? And I know it's kind of a broad statement and it might make some people feel uncomfortable, but I think it's a fair question. Why? I don't know. I've asked my friends this before. I'm like, why?
Well, I think you're wise in the sense of addressing the fact that, you know, we're two white guys, you know, and I think you're wise in the fact of having the posture to listen and to learn. I think it's a really, really valid question. I can't speak on the question per se outside of my experience in the church world. So
Sure.
for the business leaders listening
whatever
right now, I'm not going to say why a corporation does or doesn't.
Sure.
But what I will say is, I think for so long, and I do believe this in the society that we live in, just follow the money. The money. Everything in by maintaining budgets. And if there is anything that somehow upsets some evangelical bases, it's been predominantly Palestine, Black and brown communities, which that all unfolds into racism and injustice. But it was Muslims first for a part, but even Palestinians and Muslims didn't have the same angst or tied to dollars per se in a local church context as race did. And so I think that there is this sense of, if we talk too much about it, some of the biggest donors might leave. And so you put your pastor in a difficult spot to be, and I say that a little bit sarcastically, but you put them in a difficult spot to choose to do the right thing, to name what's right and name what's evil, to guide people. And I think that there was something that had happened over the years where nuance became king as a communicator. And and you saw it in The Last Dance, and I kind of got into it with a couple of people, but they were like, Jordan couldn't handle the mental toughness of the social media thing because he didn't come out and validate, a Democrat, because he said Republicans buy shoes too. And this one quote has been taken to extremes. But I'll tell you what, like Nike was just starting out. Nike was not wanting him to speak up. But you fast forward almost 30 years, Nike was the only person who stuck with Cap.
Right.
And when they saw it ready, because again, it became profitable. It became, at that time, it wasn't profitable. So again, you have to think from a business standpoint, it was profitable for, in their mind, doing the right thing to stay Cap. It was profitable for their image. This is what we want to be about, because we say we're about athletes. We're about it's profitable there. And it's also profitable, some would say, for money, but also some would say it really wasn't, because a lot of people are throwing out Nike shoes. So all of this to say is, when you have someone like Andy Stanley, and I give him just props for Ahmad Arbery, he posted early. You had Pastor Rick Warren, he posted. That signaled to a lot of megachurch white pastors, okay, we can follow the playbook. Now, the question now comes is, will it stay sympathetic, or will it move towards systemic change? And that is where we're stuck. But I think the reason why is, the fear is, if I say this, people are going to say, stop talking about politics and stop talking about race. Let's just get back to the gospel. And we would just say we believe in a holistic gospel, which is about our relationship with God, our relationship with ourselves, our relationship with our neighbor, who is everyone always, and our relationship with God's creation. That's the gospel that Jesus came to redeem, restore, renew, and invites us to be a part of. So that tension, and again, here's my thinking as being I don't consider myself a rabbi, but the Jewish community would say a great rabbi is someone who can disrupt you. Who doesn't make everything safe and sweet and sound. And unfortunately, congregants have, and we've shaped and discipled people to think this way, is we want people who are like us, and who like us, and who resonate with us, and who we are safe to them. And I think the world needs some teaching that's, it's just got a little bit more edge to it.
That's so good, man. You hit on so many good things. And I grew up in a white evangelical church, similar to what you're sharing. It's pretty larger, 2,000 people, right? I mean, in American terms, that would be definitely a mega church, not that big, but definitely up there. And and maybe it's a theological thing too, because I hear that statement you said at the end right there. Keep the politics out, just Jesus. Speak on that a little bit. And I know we're going deep into this conversation, and I think this is good, because I think this is the moment. This is the time to speak, and some people don't like it. And I'm getting to the point where it's like, this is how we grow, right? We're uncomfortable. And I'm just owning that we're going to be uncomfortable about this conversation for a while, probably forever on some level. Speak to that, because a lot of people who will listen are probably from similar circles, evangelical, right? That theology a little bit. And sometimes, and correct me if I'm wrong, sometimes I think when we talk about control, that's much easier to talk about. You have that type of theology where it's Jesus, discipleship's a small group, and keep it there. Don't go outside that. Don't go outside the box, because if you go outside the box, now it gets uncomfortable. Now that's not maybe a controlled type of theology that I like. It's dressed up for me. It's outside that norm. Can you speak a little bit more to that?
Yeah. So, if you look at Revelation in its true context, Revelation was like a book that was the enemy of the state. I mean, it was a book written against Rome. It was a book directed towards Caesar. It was John the Beloved, who my friend Glenn Packiam says would gather in small churches, and a lot of times people talk about the first church being known as the Church of the Way, but John just called his churches the Beloved. And he would be all old and he would just like scream like, beloved, you're beloved, But even this guy who would say, you're beloved, is writing saying Caesar is not it. And in a world where we have created a narrative of the flag and then the cross, or the flag and the cross, we do a disservice to God's heartbeat for everyone always. And so I think the trickier piece is let's take it to a Jesus story, because if anyone's listening to this right now, they're probably like, well, and here's the thing is, anytime you talk about this, then people want to make like our control narrative is, I want to put you in a box. So you're either an elephant, you're a donkey, you're somewhere in, and I'm like, nope, no. Let me tell you. If you take the story of like Zacchaeus, Jesus is like going to Jericho, comes across this like tax collectors just, they're committing treason. And Jesus knows him and offers and says, hey, can I come stay at your house? And nobody wanted to be around a tax collector. And they're just, nobody wanted to be around. We've got those people in our society. Nobody wants to be around that person. Jesus does. And so then this guy goes, like, has this change of heart and is like, I'm going to repay people back. Like, I want to be a part of that. And Jesus goes, salvation has come to your house, right? So this is where we stop the story. Oh, it's so amazing. Justice is happening. This is amazing.
Right.
But then Jesus tells a parable, the parable of the 10 minas, which we think is the same as the parable of the talents. They are not. They're not. They're two different parables. But here's the parable. The parable is all centered around what will it be like for Zacchaeus tomorrow? Now that he has met this rabbi named Jesus and has surrendered and salvation has come, now what does he do on Monday when he has to go back to work? When his whole life has been extort, steal, give to the empire, repeat. Now he's got to go, what's he going to do? So then Jesus tells a story that's all based on King Herod's son. It's, if you do the context, but inside the story, he's talking about Zacchaeus, and that there are some tax collectors who are going to like steal and make more, and they're going to give more to make for the empire. And then there's one guy who buries it. And it's like, Zacchaeus, who are you going to be? Are you going to bury it and say, I'm not going to play. I'm not going to extort. I'm not going to. And that is what we have to do, the work of untangling privilege, untangling the pieces in which, man, like, we can't play by culture's rules where we've allowed leaven to get in. And we have to get back and say, I'm not playing by that. You know what I'm doing? I'm actually going to choose to be a Talmudim, a disciple of a rabbi from a Middle Eastern small hole-in-the-wall city who taught me where I can experience life and life to the full, and I can walk in his presence and be fully present to myself, to the Father, to the Spirit, to the Son, and to everyone always. And until we get that and we let other distractions, and again, it can be politics, it can be our achievements, it can be sports, it can be addiction. We can let all this stuff cloud that. The goal is to simmer it down and say, okay, all of that stuff I've got to bury and say, I'm not playing by those rules. I'm not. And I'm going to play by another set of kingdom perspectives. So I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of the way I look at it.
No, that is so good. I feel this was not where I thought this conversation was going to go, but I love it because I feel like letting go of control. I love it because it's so good. And man, you got my head spinning. You got my heart spinning. I love it. And I think letting go of control and what people think about me. I love what you shared before a little bit ago. because I do think even in this conversation, we care a lot about what people think of us, and whether we admit that or not. And I think something God has been teaching me is letting it go, letting that go. I cannot control that. And I think, when we talk about, will you speak up, but not just sympathize, but attack the systematic issues, people won't like it. It's just what it's going to be. There will be people who push back. There'll be people who text you and message you and and it's like, I got to let that go. I've got to let go of the opinions of people around me, especially leaders, because leaders tend to care a lot about what people think about them.
Well, and especially from threes, threes care about their image on the Enneagram. And so, but I think that for any of you who cares about your reputation, may I just remind you, Jesus cared about his reputation. He would have never left heaven. It was really good for him there. And what did he decide to do? He decided to get a little bit messy. He emptied himself out of all of his privilege and his power. It's the great kenosis, and chose to value others above himself. And we either follow that example and pick up our cross and go and do likewise, or we just go on saying we're something when our lives look desperately incongruent with that. And so I think that's the invitation for all of us. Invitation for me. Like I'm trying to figure this out. I'm trying to live into that. And I screw up all the time, but I'm trying. And that's what integrity is. But here's the thing: wherever you find your identity, whether it's a political party, wherever you find your identity, whether it's a job, wherever you find your identity, whether it's your school or your education or your kids, wherever you find your identity, you will live with integrity towards that. So if your identity is based on achievement, reputation, success, all of that, you will live with integrity and intentionality to build that success, build that platform, build that. But if your identity is grounded in you are beloved, is that you probably never imagined, but you're actually going to get to showcase what a beloved life is all about. And I think it might end in some pain and hardship, because not everybody wants that. But welcome to the life of Christ. Welcome to the kingdom.
It's good. It's good. Love this, man. Just love this conversation. I love it. And yeah, anything else you want to share? I know share a little bit about crafting character, just that project, but also anything else that's on your heart, man. Just super open. Anything else? Or
no, man, I just say, Joey, what you are doing matters, and for anybody who's listening. And I think for us as leaders, we all have spaces that we've been entrusted, gifts that we've been entrusted, stories that we've been entrusted. And I think for anyone who's listening, my prayer is that through these 17 podcasts and through where Joey's dreaming it all up and wanting to take you is that you would just kind of lean in and really allow the Spirit to just guide you and remind you to keep the main thing, but to continue to step out and take risks, and be expectant and dependent on what God wants to do in you and through you.
Appreciate that, Steve. Appreciate that, man. And I know your heart is similar for speakers and communicators. I know there's people who listen to this that are preachers, but also communicators in so many different realms. You've got an awesome thing going on. Did you want to just share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we launched something called Crafting Character. And again, I know a lot of people who are working on their craft of communication. And that's awesome. And I know a number of people who are doing a ton of spiritual exercises and practices and working on their character. But the key idea is that ampersand in the middle is that the craft and the character. Dave Chappelle, the great comedian, he had this one moment where season 5, he'd signed a $50 million deal and he bails episode 5 and he's just like, I'm done. A number of months later, he finds himself on a couch with Oprah, and Oprah asks him, why did you do it? Why did you leave? Why did you go to South Africa? Why did you stay in a monastery? Why did you do this? And he just said, because sometimes success can take you places that your character cannot sustain. And
Mm.
I see this happening in leaders where they have focused on their craft and their character is a far distance behind. And I just want us to be the kind of people, especially as faith leaders and as communicators, to have our character lead the way. And so this is an opportunity for anybody who's a teacher to grow in their communication gift, but also to learn from world-class leaders how their character can lead the way.
It's awesome. It's awesome. Love it. And I myself have talked with a lot of leaders, and not just in the church realm, but just all over the place, I feel like, who just are tired and maybe burnt out and are struggling to take care of themselves. They're even losing themselves. Like you said, like Dave should, like he almost lost himself in the craft, and his character got, attacked and lost. And so excited, if you're a communicator, a preacher, a pastor, youth pastor, whatever, speaker, check out their Instagram. Make sure you check out you have an event coming up here soon, correct?
Yeah, it's on June 4th, and it'll be a live event. We got Darius Daniels, Derwin Gray, Hosanna Wong, Carrie Newhoff, myself, and it's just gonna be a real interactive live experience. It's gonna be really fun. You can learn more at craftandcharacter.org.
Awesome. Well, if you're listening to this, make sure you check that out. Make sure, and does it cost?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the cost is. I think it was like $49 if I remember right, or $79. I don't know. I'm out of all the business stuff of it, but
Yeah.
there's a bank called CDF Capital that's kind of like they run all the logistics of it. But but tune in. But then it will also play afterwards, I think, for a cost as well.
Cool. Well, make sure, if you're listening to this, guys, make sure you get connected to this dude. If anything, follow him on Instagram. So many just powerful posts, and his heart for God's kingdom is just inspiring to me. I've learned so much, even in this episode, learned so much. I know we've learned so much together. And let's just continue to lose control. And that sounds counterintuitive to everything our America tells us. But as we lose control, we give control to the Lord. And we're going to see restoration in this land, and we're going to see restoration in ourselves. And so love you guys. Again, thank you so much for just joining this podcast, this episode. We are just honored to have you all. You don't have to listen, but you want to listen, and we appreciate that. Love you guys. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, bro.
Appreciate you, bro.